The sun hadn't even cracked a tree line when Jack Donnelly stepped outside, mug in one hand, leash in the other. The lake shimmered in the early morning light, calm and undisturbed, just the way he liked it. Harley, his old yellow lab, trotted beside him, tail wagging like he knew it was going to be a peaceful day. Only, it wasn't. There it was, halfway down the slope that led to the lake, his dog, or what used to be his dog. Now it was chained off, a thick, industrial padlock, glinted in the sun, snapped around the metal gate at the top of the access ramp. Zip-tied to the post beside it was a shiny, laminated sign. Community shoreline access. HOA key required. Jack blinked once, then twice. He reached out, tugged the chain, heard the clink of steel. He stared at the sign like it was a joke. Harley let out a low growl. The joke got worse when Jack turned around and spotted a sheet of paper wedged between the slats of his mailbox. No envelope. Just folded, water straight, and reeking of smugness. Dear Mr. Donnelly, the HOA has determined that your dog falls within the designated community shoreline visibility corridor, and may therefore be classified under common recreational infrastructure, according to Article 7b of the Silver Point Ridge HOA Charter. He didn't read the rest, crumpled it, tossed it into the trash on his way back up the porch stairs, his boots thudding like distant thunder. Jack wasn't a lawyer, but he was a fighter. 26 years on the Charlotte Fire Department, 11 of them as a captain, and 5 saving people who didn't even want to be saved. He'd survived backdrafts, house collapses, and engine fires that cooked steel. He'd be damned if he was going to lose to a bunch of clipboard warriors with printed bylaws and matching WINDBREAKERS. He spent the afternoon digging through the original deed, the land surveys, the zoning maps. His dock was squarely on his property, not an inch over the boundary, built with his money, with a permit from the city planning board issued 10 years prior. But the HOA? They didn't care about facts. They cared about control. That evening, while the neighborhood prepared for movie night on the lawn, Jack grabbed a set of bolt cutters from his garage. Harley followed, ears perked. Jack walked down to the gate, snapped the chain in one clean cut, and threw it into the bushes. The laminated sign followed Dot in its place. He hung a hand-painted wooden board with black letters carved deep. Private dock. Nitrogen monoxide trespassing. Violators will be fed to the catfish. That should have been the end of it. Only it wasn't. That night, something strange happened. Jack was sitting on the back porch, sipping whiskey and watching the fireflies when the dock light flicked on. He frowned. It was on a motion sensor, but there was no wind, no raccoons, no Harley. He squinted into the dark. A figure stood at the edge of the dock, tall, still, clipboard in hand. The face was turned just enough to reflect the soft orange glow from the solar light. Someone was writing. Jack shot up, knocking over his drink. He grabbed the flashlight beside the door and sprinted down the slope. The gravel crunched beneath his boots. Harley barked from inside Dot by the time Jack hit the dock. The figure was gone. No footprints, no tire tracks, nothing. But the real punch came the next morning. Jack woke up, checked his phone, and blinked at the whole website's homepage. Right at the top, board agenda update, pending reclassification of dock. At 17 Redwater Lanapropist integration into community kayak program. Voting next session. They weren't just staking a claim. They were planning to take it. Legally. Publicly. And they were doing it fast. Jack looked out the window. The lake was still. The dock sat quiet, innocent. But it wasn't his anymore. Not unless he fought back. By the time Jack arrived at the community center for the HOA meeting, the parking lot was already full. BMWs and Subarus lined up like sentries outside the brick building. Inside, folding chairs had been arranged into rigid rows, as if even the furniture feared stepping out of line. Jack didn't sit. He stood at the back, arms folded, eyes locked. On the board dot at the head of the table sat Trina Bellamont, HOA president and self-declared protector of community order. She wore a navy blue blazer, white blouse, and the kind of expression you'd see on someone explaining how lemonade stands were a fire hazard. The meeting dragged through budget updates and lawn violations. Then came the agenda item Jack was waiting for. Proposal 7B, dock reclassification at Lot 17, Redwater Lane. Trina cleared her throat. We've received multiple resident complaints regarding dock accessibility and community enjoyment. It is the board's position that the dock in question, though constructed by Mr. Donnelly, is situated within the visual commons and has been underutilized as a private feature. Therefore, we propose converting it into shared recreational space to promote equity of access. Jack laughed loud enough to make every head turn. Visual commons? He barked. It's my dock, Trina. It's on my land. There's no law, rule, or ounce of common sense that gives the HOA a claim to it. Trina smiled tightly. Mr. Donnelly, we respect your contributions to the neighborhood, but the HOA Charter grants us the right to regulate features that impact shared enjoyment, and several residents have expressed that your private dock is exclusive. It's exclusive because I built it. You people think because you can see it, you somehow own it. A few folks chuckled in the back. Trina's eye twitched. Then came Stu Harris, Jack's next-door neighbor and unofficial HOA conspiracy theorist. Stu was pushing 70, wore aviators, indoors, and believed every HOA board since 2003 was part of a cover-up. For the record, Stu called out, Trina's cousin rented a place here last month and was seen trying to launch a kayak off Jack's dock. Maybe that's the real reason it's up for community use. Murmurs erupted. Trina's smile cracked. That is entirely irrelevant and inappropriate. So is padlocking a man's dock, Jack cut in. I've got the deed. I've got permits. If you try to vote this through, you'll be staring down a lawsuit before sunset. Trina went red, but she didn't flinch. The board will consider legal risk, but we are proceeding with the motion. 4 hands went up. 1 abstained. Trina's passed the motion. It was official now, at least in the eyes of the HOA. But Jack wasn't done. He marched out, booted up his truck, and drove straight to Maria Kent, a no-nonsense property rights attorney in town, who'd made her reputation by kneecapping overreaching HOA letters. Maria listened, nodded once, then pulled out a yellow, legal pad. They're bluffing, she said. They have no jurisdiction over private property unless your plat is misfiled, or you signed away dock rights when you bought the home. Didn't. And didn't. Then we hit back. First, demand they remove the lock or face a trespassing suit. Second, file for a cease and desist to halt all community access claims. Third, she leaned back, smirked. Let's take a look at their docks, back at Silver Point. Jack didn't wait. That night, he cut the lock again, this time, leaving it on Trina's front lawn. Then he installed a trail cam facing the dock, a hidden GoPro in a birdhouse, and a motion light rigged to scream like a car alarm if someone stepped foot without permission. 2 nights later, the alarm blared at 1:14 a.m. Jack ran outside in his robe and boots, nothing but leg fog. Until he checked the camera. The footage was grainy, but unmistakable. A teen boy, tall, lanky, clipboard in one hand, walked down the dock, looked into the camera, and flipped it off before unscrewing the motion light bulb. He recognized the face, Trina's son. Jack watched the grainy trail cam footage 3 more times. Trina Belmont's teenage son, clipboard in hand, strolling across his dock at 1:14 in the morning. No permission. No shame. Just entitlement passed down like a family heirloom. By sunrise, Jack was already at Maria Kent's office. That kid trespassed. On camera. I want them charged. Maria held up a hand. We'll get there. But first we play it smarter. You hit back too hard, too fast, they spin it like you're the aggressor. We go for something better. Exposure. Jack didn't like waiting. Firemen aren't trained to sit and smile while the house burns. But Maria was right. He needed to beat the hoe on their turf paper, process, and politics. That afternoon, Jack met up with Stu Harris, his neighbor with more HOA skeletons than the board had lawn flamingos. Together, they went digging. Stu brought out 3 boxes from his basement meeting minutes, emails, and community maps dating back 15 years. The man was practically running a cold case file on Silver Point Ridge. Look at this, Stu muttered, jabbing a finger at a crumpled printout. This here's Trina's own dock approval from 5 years ago. Her permits expired, and it says she applied it under a temporary emergency boat launch waiver. Jack's eyebrows shot up. Emergency launch, yeah. For her cousin's paddleboard rental business. The one that lasted all of 3 weeks. That wasn't all. Stu had another gem, a map of HOA member-owned properties. And 2 of them Vice President Alan Deeks and Treasurer Margaret Cross had docks too. Private ones. Unaudited. Unpermitted. Hidden in the tree line where nobody would notice. Jack took one look and smiled for the first time in days. Let's go fishing. The next morning, Jack hired a licensed drone operator from the next town over. No HOA rules against aerial photography, after all. And once the drone was in the air, the results were devastating. Docks, 3 of them, clearly, built without any uniform spacing or clearance. No signage, no community access. 2 even had locked gates just like the one they'd forced onto Jack. Jack uploaded the drone footage into a private folder. Then he created a slideshow time-stamped photos, permit records or lack thereof, and every HOA name attached to those docs. He didn't go public. Not yet. He just emailed the file to every homeowner in Silver Point Ridge. Subject line. 1 rule for them, another for you. Within hours. It was all over the neighborhood Facebook page. The post had 74 comments by lunchtime. By dinner, neighbors who hadn't spoken in years were gathered in Jack's driveway, watching the slideshow on a fold-up projector screen he mounted on the garage door. People gasped. They cursed. One guy nearly choked on his hot dog when he saw his HOA dues paid for Trina's emergency dock. For a paddleboard business that didn't even pay taxes. Even folks who didn't like Jack were angry now, because it wasn't just about the dock anymore. It was about control. The HOA had tried to enforce rules they weren't following themselves, and they picked the wrong guy to make an example out of. The next HOA meeting, standing room only. Jack didn't even speak. He didn't have to. Stu brought a printout of the drone footage, passed it around like a courtroom exhibit. Maria showed up, dropped a cease and desist on the board table, and handed Trina a letter of intent to sue for trespassing, harassment, and unlawful seizure of private property. Trina's face looked like she'd swallowed a battery. You blindsided. US with this media stunt, she hissed to Jack on the way out. Nah, he replied calmly. You lit the match. I just made sure everyone saw the fire. But Jack didn't even know what was coming next. Because when he got home that night, there was another letter tucked in his door frame. This time it wasn't from the HOA. It was anonymous. Handwritten. 3 lines, no signature. Careful who you humiliate. You may own a dock, but some of us own your peace. Jack Donnelly stared at the anonymous note like it had teeth. Careful who you humiliate. You may own a dock, but some of us own your piece. He read it 3 times, then folded it carefully and slid it into a plastic sandwich bag. That kind of thing wasn't just petty, it was personal. Somebody knew exactly how to rattle him. And worse, they'd walked up to his door to do it. Jack didn't call the police. He didn't call Maria either. He just walked out to his dock, stood at the edge, and stared across the lake like it had betrayed him. Harley followed, tail low. Like even the dog could feel something in the air had shifted. By morning, Jack wasn't thinking about retreat. He was thinking about demolition. Not of the dock, of the HOA. And Stu? He was already 10 steps ahead. They're scared, Stu said, pacing Jack's living room with 2 binders under his arm. You hit M where it hurts. Now they're scrambling. Look at this, an emergency board session. Off the record. No public invite. Happens tomorrow at 10 a.m. No notes, no cameras. Where? Jack asked. HOA maintenance shed. Backlot. Behind the tennis courts. Jack raised an eyebrow. They're holding a meeting in a tool shed. Yeah, because what they're about to say shouldn't be on paper. That night, Jack parked 2 blocks away and walked in darkness to the maintenance shed. Stu was already there, perched behind a hedge like a graying ninja, gripping a digital voice recorder and a half-eaten granola bar. They're inside, Stu whispered. All 5 of them. Trina, Deeks, Margaret, that new guy Henry, and Davis. The one who never talks. Yeah, him too. They couldn't see faces, but voices drifted through the vents loud enough to make out pieces. If the footage goes public, we're liable for everything. He's not bluffing, he's got legal counsel now. We need to consider an accelerated vote. To revoke his membership, you can't revoke someone's property line, Trina. Then we bury him in fees. Ordinance violations. Noise complaints if he misses 1 payment. Lean City. Jack felt his fists clench. Not a whisper of regret in that shed. Just strategy. Cold. Bureaucratic warfare. Back in Maria's office, he handed over the recording. They're not just breaking the rules, Jack said. They're weaponizing the system. Maria didn't even blink. Perfect. We use it. Next move, we counterfile. Class action. That drone footage stirred up more than outrage. I've got 5 homeowners ready to sign on. We hit them with abuse of power, unequal enforcement, and breach of fiduciary duty. That'll bury them in court. That's the point. Jack exhaled. He hadn't realized he was holding his breath. That evening, he went out to the dock. Just after sunset, he brought a 6-pack and Harley, and for the first time in weeks, he just sat, watched the water, let the quiet soak in, until it wasn't quiet anymore. A splash, loud, heavy, followed by a rustle in the reeds. Jack turned. Nothing. But then another splash closer this time. He grabbed his flashlight, shined it across the water. Two glowing eyes blinked back at him from the bank. Deer? Maybe. But Jack had lived near this lake long enough to know deer didn't wade waist deep into the shoreline. And stay still. He stood, walked up the slope, checked the trail cam. Gone. That night, his motion alarm never triggered. But in the morning, the dock was different. Not damaged, not vandalized. Just cleaner. The private dock sign was gone. Grooves pulled out neatly. No scratches. No footprints. Nothing missing. No lock tampered with. Whoever came wasn't there to destroy anything. They were there to send a message. Maria showed up midday with something worse. You need to see this, she said, sliding her phone across the table. It was a scanned document. An anonymous submission to the county zoning board. A complaint. claiming Jack's entire property had been misclassified 20 years ago, that his deed line was fraudulent, and that the dock was actually built on a sliver of county-controlled utility buffer land, making it public, not private. It was a long shot, a legal Hail Mary, but if the county even considered it, the HOA could stall the case indefinitely. "They're trying to move the battlefield," Maria said quietly, "out of HOA hands, into the county's. If they pull this off, you'll be stuck in red tape for years." Jack Donnelly stood in the middle of his living room, a highlighter in one hand, coffee in the other, staring down at a copy of the county zoning complaint like it had personally insulted him. Because it had. Somehow, the HOA had managed to file a petition questioning the legal boundary lines of his property. They weren't just after his dock anymore. They were trying to erase his claim to the entire strip of shoreline behind his house. "This is garbage," Jack muttered, flipping through the packet. "They're gambling on confusion and old maps," but Maria wasn't so sure. "This isn't your standard HOA bluff," she said from across the table, scrolling through emails. "Whoever filed this complaint had access to archived county plats from 30 years ago. That's not something you dig up by accident. Someone has connections, or a grudge, or both." The worst part, until the county reviewed the claim, the legal ownership of the dock and the land it stood on was officially under dispute, meaning the HOA could motion to freeze Jack's ability to make changes, file permits, or even access it without a monitor. And they were wasting no time. The very next day, Jack found a freshly installed orange flag planted beside the dock ramp, the kind surveyors used to mark contested zones. The tag read, "Pending review. Do not alter terrain." Jack ripped it out of the ground and snapped it in half. That evening, he heard voices down by the waterline, board members. 3 of them, flashlights sweeping the shoreline like they were searching for ghosts. Jack turned on the floodlight. "Private property," he called out from his porch. "Leave before I call the sheriff." One of them, Alan Deeks, just raised a phone and snapped a picture. "You're trespassing on county-monitored land, Donnelly," he said. "You might want to step off before we call them." They left, but the threat stayed. Jack called Maria again. "They're staging something. They're trying to set me up." Maria agreed. And then she dropped the bomb. "We got the original survey maps, but they're missing a plat overlay from 1994. If the HOA's claim is based on that version, and we don't have it, we're stuck fighting a ghost. Then we find it. That's the problem. The county says it's been archived permanently, lost in the flood cleanup records, they claim." Jack paused. He knew someone who might have a copy. An old friend, one he didn't like calling. Carl Penderson, former zoning officer, now a recluse who lived off-grid in a cabin north of the lake. He and Jack hadn't spoken in 10 years, not since Carl tried to block Jack's original dock permit over a vegetation buffer. Still, Jack drove up there the next morning. Carl answered the door in socks and suspenders. "You're lucky I hate the HOA more than I hate you," he muttered and handed Jack a dusty tube from a corner shelf. "You didn't get this from me." Jack unrolled the map in the bed of his truck and froze. The 1994 overlay showed 2 separate survey lines, one current, one proposed, and a handwritten note in faded red ink, "Revert to original shoreline. Boundary unless rezoned via board approval." That rezoning never happened, which meant Jack's deed line was rock solid. It also meant the HOA's entire zoning complaint was built on a map that had already been invalidated, and they had to have known that. Jack drove straight to Maria's office. She scanned the map, shook her head, and grinned. "This isn't just good. This is gold. We file a countersuit immediately, falsified claims. legal harassment, intentional interference with land use. This could shatter their standing. But just as she reached for her keyboard, her phone buzzed. She looked at the screen and frowned. "You're not going to like this." She turned the screen to Jack. It was a post from the Silver Point Ridge HOA Facebook group. Emergency meeting notice. In light of security concerns and disruptive behavior by Lot 17's owner, the board has voted to issue a temporary no-contact order, barring Mr. Donnelly from attending HOA meetings until further review. Jack blinked. They'd locked him out of his own defense. And worse, the post was shared by someone named Davis Coates, the quietest board member. The same man who hadn't said a word in months. Jack thought he was neutral, disengaged. He wasn't. He was the one who'd filed the zoning complaint. Jack Donnelly sat across from Maria in her office. The 1994 zoning overlay rolled out on the table between them like a treasure map. Only this one didn't lead to gold, it led to war. With a single faded note, the HOA's entire legal maneuver crumbled. "We hit them now," Jack said, voice low. "This proves the shoreline was never public. We're filing the injunction tonight." Maria replied, "And once the judge sees this map, the HOA's complaint will dissolve faster than cheap mulch." But just as she leaned forward to upload the scanned map to the court portal, her laptop screen blinked, then froze. "Huh?" she muttered. "That's odd. System crash. Her document storage cloud offline." The client folder vanished. Jack's heart dropped. "That's not a coincidence." "No," Maria said, fingers flying over the keys. "That's deliberate." And then came the call from her assistant. "Maria, someone accessed our server remotely last night. From an outside IP, credentials used were yours." Maria's face hardened. She stood, picked up her phone, and dialed IT. Jack stared at the frozen screen. He didn't understand all the digital details, but he understood one thing. Someone had sabotaged the case, and it had to be someone inside. The next day, Jack returned home to find a white envelope taped to his front door. No postage. Just a name written in looping black marker, Davis Coates. Inside was a single typed page. "I know what they're doing is wrong. I know the map proves it. But Trina's not acting alone. You're looking at the board. You should be looking at your lawyer's office. Ask Maria about April 6th. She's not who you think. No signature. No contact info. Just enough to light Jack's nerves on fire. April 6th. He dug through his notes. April 6th was the day Maria had received the HOA's original zoning complaint. The same day she'd told Jack the records office lost the 1994 plat. Coincidence or cover-up? He drove to Maria's office, waited in the parking lot, watched through the window as she paced with her phone, then grabbed a flash drive from her drawer and handed it to a man in a dark windbreaker. Not a courier, not a client. Davis Coates, the quiet board member who never spoke, except when he dropped legal nukes. Jack's stomach turned. When Maria finally spotted him watching from the truck, her smile dropped. She stepped outside, calm and composed. "Jack," she said, as if she'd just come from yoga. "What's going on?" "That's my question," he shot back. "You said you lost the map. Then I bring it in, and someone hacks your system. And then you hand a flash drive to Davis freaking Coates." Maria's eyes narrowed. "You need to stop jumping to conclusions. That flash drive was evidence. Davis said he had internal HOA emails confirming they doctored their own vote logs. Since when does the HOA's inside man suddenly turn whistleblower? Since he realized Trina's using him as a fall guy," she said quickly. Too quickly. Jack studied her, reading more in what she didn't say. She was sweating. Not visibly, but the kind of sweat that came from a tightrope walk between truth and trouble. "I want the file back," Jack said. "You'll have it. Everything's under control." He didn't believe her. That night, Jack got a call from Stu. "Buddy, you better sit down for this." The HOA had submitted a second zoning complaint, this time with brand new plat lines, digitally modified. They now claimed Jack's dock actually crossed 2 feet onto a conservation easement. It was a fake, obvious to anyone who knew the land. But it meant the county had to pause review again. "They're stalling," Jack muttered. "Buying time. They're scared." "They should be," Stu replied, "because we just found something better than that old map." He emailed it over. A scanned copy of the original HOA charter addendum signed in 2001. A clause clearly stating that all docks built prior to 2005 were exempt from any shared use conversions, including Jack's. They buried it in the archive. "Jack, they've known all along your dock was protected." It took 2 weeks for the county court to grant Jack Donnelly's injunction hearing. 2 weeks of orange flags, drone buzzes, passive-aggressive Facebook posts, and HOA board members pacing past his property like sharks smelling blood. But Jack didn't flinch. Because in a manila folder on his lap sat the final bullet. A copy of the 2001 HOA charter addendum clause the board had quietly buried 2 decades earlier. And the ink was clear as day. All docks constructed before January 1st, 2005 shall be permanently grandfathered and protected from reassignment, easement, or community conversion under future bylaws. Jack's dock, built in 2004. The HOA didn't just mess up. They lied. The courtroom was small, just 2 rows of benches, a county judge who looked like she'd rather be trout fishing, and a folding table used as a defendant's desk. Jack wore boots, jeans, and a collared shirt. Trina Bellamont, on the other hand, showed up like she was accepting an award, gray suit, clipboard, and an attitude like she still believed the system worked for her. Maria was late. Jack's eyes darted toward the back every few minutes. "Where the hell is she?" Trina's attorney began with a speech about community values and shared responsibilities. The judge looked unimpressed. Then it was Jack's turn. He stood up, cleared his throat, and handed the clerk the folder. "Exhibit A, HOA Addendum 2001, Clause for B," he said, "proving my dock is legally exempt from community reassignment." The judge flipped through it, raised an eyebrow, and glanced at Trina's table. "Ms. Bellamont, was this clause ever revoked or amended?" Trina opened her mouth, then paused. Her lawyer whispered something quickly, but the judge caught it. "Answer the question." Trina swallowed. "It was not. It was omitted from the current version of the charter during reformatting in 2011. By mistake." Jack stepped forward. "You mean deleted, hidden, so you could start claiming property you had no legal right to?" "Objection," Trina's attorney snapped. "Sustained," the judge replied, though her eyes stayed locked on Trina. Then the judge turned to Jack. "Mr. Donnelly, your documentation is thorough. However, the HOA has filed a counterclaim citing zoning discrepancies." "About that," Jack said. "Exhibit B." He held up a blown-up image of the digitally altered plat map and the original 1994 overlay. Side by side, "This is the map submitted by the HOA. This," he said, lifting the second board, "is the original, sourced from a county records officer. As you can see, the HOAS version is altered." The judge leaned forward. "Do you have proof of when the altered file was created?" Jack nodded to the back just as the door creaked open. Maria walked in, face pale, hair a mess, and behind her Davis coates. Maria stepped to the front without saying a word and handed the judge a USB drive. "Your Honor, this contains server logs from my firm. They show a file. This exact one was accessed and uploaded under the credentials of an HOA board member. Davis coates. Guests echoed from the benches. Davis cleared his throat and finally spoke. I was told to do it. I didn't create the file, but I submitted it because Trina said we needed to stall the case. I didn't know the original map still existed. And did Ms. Bellamont instruct you to submit the altered file? Davis hesitated, then nodded. Double quotes. Yes, ma'am. Trina's face went stone cold. She didn't speak. Her lawyer whispered something in her ear, but it was too late. The judge turned to her with a tone that could crack glass. You knowingly submitted falsified documentation to block a private citizen's property rights. That's a criminal offense. The gavel came down hard. Effective immediately, Mr. Donnelly's property is cleared of all claims. The HOA's complaint is dismissed with prejudice, and I am referring this board's conduct to the county attorney's office for further investigation. Jack exhaled for the first time in weeks. It was over. Or so he thought. Outside the courthouse, Jack stood under the afternoon sun as Maria handed him the original documents. I'm sorry, she said. I didn't know Davis had access. I should have locked it down. Jack nodded slowly, still unsure if he believed her. Let's just say the war's done, he said. No need to burn any more bridges. Maybe, Maria said, but I think they're still lighting matches. Jack raised an eyebrow. What? She handed him a folded slip of paper. No envelope. Left anonymously at her office that morning. It read, this wasn't about a dog. You were just the test. Check. Who Trina signed contracts with last June. You're not the only one they're trying to erase. Jack Donnelly stood in the middle of his dock, the wind brushing over Silver Point Lake like the place had finally exhaled. His dock was his again. The court case was over. The HOA silenced. But Jack knew better than to mistake quiet for peace, especially after Maria handed him that folded note. This wasn't about a dock. You were just the test. Check who Trina signed contracts with last June. You're not the only one there. Trying to erase, Jack didn't waste time. That night, he logged into the county's public development site, searched Silver Point Ridge, and there it was filed under a nondescript legal name, Blue Arbor Holdings LLC, a land development firm. 3 parcels under contract. One of them, a wooded shoreline behind Stu Harris's house. Another belonged to Trina herself. And the third, a narrow stretch bordering Jack's dock. Son of a... Jack whispered. They were never after my dog for the community. They wanted the shoreline access point to increase property value for the parcels they were about to sell. It was all about positioning. Trina didn't want to take Jack's dock. She wanted it next to her parcel, so she could pitch a lakeside deal to developers for triple the value. And she almost got away with it. Jack met Stu in his garage with the documents. They're selling us out, Jack said. No kidding, Stu muttered. Trina's cousin is listed as Blue Arbor's consultant. That's why she kept pushing those community initiatives, kayak launches, shoreline walkways. It wasn't for the HOA. It was for them. They dug deeper, it turns out. 5 other board members had quietly amended their property covenants, making them easier to subdivide, but only after trying to enforce stricter rules on everyone else. They were creating scarcity, Maria said when Jack filled her in. Force other docks to become public, lock residents out, then market their land as the only private access lots. It was a real estate hustle masked as community improvement, and Jack had just blown it open. But the real turn came when Jack received an envelope in the mail. Inside were photos, grainy but reloved Jack at his dock, with red X drawn over his chest. On the back of the envelope, scrawled in jagged ink, "Back off, or the lake won't be the only thing you lose." Jack stared at it. Something in his gut snapped into place. It was never just about the HOA. It was bigger, dirtier. So Jack did what no one expected. He called the local newspaper, and then he handed everything over: court files, zoning maps, altered plat overlays, whistleblower notes, HOA emails, and the development contracts. The story ran under the title, Shoreline Scam. How an HOA tried to steal lake access for private profit. It went viral within days. Regional news picked it up, then statewide. By week's end, the HOA board resigned and Massablu Arbor Holdings was slapped with a cease and desist. And the county attorney opened an investigation into fraud, forgery, and civil conspiracy. Jack received a formal letter of apology from the interim HOA chair, hand-delivered. He didn't even open it. He just pinned it to his dock's gatepost, next to a new sign: private property, not for sale, not for rent, not for stealing. Weeks passed. The lake returned to quiet. Residents smiled more. Stu got elected to the new HOA board. First order of business: transparency bylaws. As for Jack, he built a bench at the end of his dock. Not for fishing, not for sitting, for remembering. Because he knew something that the HOA never did. You don't own a neighborhood by paperwork. You own it by standing your ground.